Hi, everybody. Welcome to your Read Aloud video for They Were Free at Last. And we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. I am going to read to you, but I am not going to highlight all the questions. What I will do is pause occasionally and tell you where the questions will be found. So I'm basically going to chunk the reading up, and then you'll be looking for the questions section by section. So you should have your questions in front of you. I am not going to have the questions on the screen today. And I'm going to start. So they were free at last. Land ho! Land! Land ho! The men, women, and children on the little ship looked up. They saw a sailor on top of the tallest mast, waving and shouting. They could hardly believe what he was saying. They rushed to the side of the ship. It was true. There was land ahead. The trip from England had been terrible. The travelers had been at sea for 65 days. Great storms had shaken and tossed the ship. Huge waves had crashed down on it. But now, on November 19th, 1620, land was in sight. The people on the ship cried with joy and gave thanks to God. At last, they could see the shore of the new world. Who were these people who had made such a dangerous trip? Why had they left their homes to settle in a wilderness? They had come to America because in England they were outlaws. The laws of England said that there could be only one kind of church. This was the Church of England, and it was ruled by the English king. What if you wanted a different religious service? What if you and a group of friends worshipped in your own home? Several groups of English people tried this. Many of them were thrown in jail. These people were called separatists because they wanted a separate church, a church of their own. So you'll want to pause the video there. I'm going to draw a line right here. So from the beginning down to this line where we have read already, you're going to be looking for questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. So again, pause the video, find those questions, highlight the answers to questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, and number them, and then you can begin the video. You can start the video again. All right, welcome back. I hope you're able to find questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're now going to be looking for questions 5 and 6 in the next section here. At first, the separatists thought of going to Holland, where the Dutch were allowed to worship freely. Many of them packed up and moved there in 1608. But after a while, they became unhappy with their new home. They did not like to see their children speaking Dutch instead of English. The separatists wanted to keep their religious freedom, but they also wanted to be English. Now they began to think about starting over again somewhere else in America. The English government allowed people such as separatists to move to land it held overseas. It did so to encourage the growth of colonies in the New World. So one autumn day in 1620, a group of separatists met together on a dock in Plymouth, England. They crowded onto the deck of a little ship called the Mayflower. For 2 long months at sea, they suffered terribly from storms and sickness. Then, at last, they reached the edge of North America. So we're going to pause there, and you're going to be looking for questions 5 and 6 in this section here. So go ahead, pause the video, find the answers to questions 5 and 6, highlight them, and then you can restart the video. All right, moving on. I'm going to grab a different color here. We're going to be looking for questions 7, 8, and 9 in this next chunk of the reading. The English government had given the separatists a charter to settle in Virginia. But perhaps by accident, the captain of the Mayflower had taken them far to the north, outside of the Virginia territory. Even so, the passengers were eager to go ashore. They decided to settle where the captain had taken them, in New England, near Cape Cod. While still on board ship, they signed a compact or agreement. They agreed to obey all laws that were made for the good of their settlement. This Mayflower Compact marked an important step toward self government in the New World. Settling in Plymouth. Now, the ship's passengers would have to build a village. But where? They looked up and down the coast of Massachusetts. After a month of searching, they found a good place to start building. They named it Plymouth after the town they had left in England. The first winter in Plymouth was very hard. The settlers had never known such cold in England. About half of them died of hunger and disease. But in the spring, help came. A tall Indian named Samoset walked into the little village. He was a quiet, helpful man, as were many of the other Indians who lived in the area. One of them, named Squanto, came to live in Plymouth. He showed the English how to plant corn, pumpkins, and beans. He also showed them the Indian ways of hunting and fishing. The Plymouth colony might not have lasted if it had not been for Squanto. At Plymouth, the separatists, or pilgrims as we now call them, found what they had come for. They were at last free to build their own church and worship in their own way. English laws did not bother them in the American wilderness. So we'll draw a line right there, and going back up to the beginning of that section, you're going to pause the video and look for questions 7, 8, and 9, and then you can restart the video and we'll keep reading. Okay, welcome back. We're now going to be looking for questions 10, 11, and 12 in this next section. Back in England, meanwhile, laws about religion were getting even more strict. More and more people were being punished and even tortured for their beliefs. One group, called Puritans, were fighting to change the English church. They thought the church put too much stress on ceremony. For example, they disliked the costly robes worn by ministers of the church. They thought a minister should dress more simply. Just for speaking their minds about this, Puritans could be whipped and jailed. Like the Pilgrims, they too began thinking of escaping to America. Hundreds of them finally decided to make the dangerous voyage. In 1630, 17 ships landed in a harbor several miles north of Plymouth. On board were about 2,000 people, 20 times the number of people carried by the Mayflower. Some were Puritans, most were not. But a Puritan, John Winthrop, was governor. Other leaders were also Puritans. They set to work building a new English colony to the north of Plymouth. They called this colony Massachusetts Bay. The Puritan leaders decided where towns should be built. They named one town Boston, another Salem, and a third Newton. The Puritans believed that only they could understand the true meaning of the Bible. At first, they thought that only they could make the proper laws for Massachusetts Bay. So we'll pause there, and you're going to be looking in this section here that we just read for questions 10, 11, and 12, and then I'll see you when you restart the video. Okay, welcome back. We're going to be looking for just one question here, question 13 in this next chunk. But John Winthrop was a fair-minded man. He could see that more and more settlers were coming to the colony. He thought that the views of these newcomers should be taken into account. So in 1630, he and other leaders worked out a plan for holding some elections. This was the first step on the road to democracy in Massachusetts Bay. In other ways, the Puritans were less fair-minded. They forced everyone to live according to Puritan teachings. everyone was required to go to Puritan churches. People who fell asleep in the Boston church could be whipped at the town whipping post. Puritans thought such punishments were needed. They believed strong religious laws would make people respect the Bible. All right, so we'll pause there. You're just looking for that one question, question 13. In what ways were the Puritans not fair minded? Okay, in this last chunk of the video, we're going to be looking for, pick a color here. We're going to be looking for the final three questions, 14, 15, and 16. We're going to read right to the end. Puritan critic. One young minister, however, began to wonder about all these laws and punishments. He began to ask hard questions. Was it right, he asked, for people to be forced to go to church? Could people who were wicked at heart be saved simply by sitting in church every Sunday? Did the English colonists have a right to take land away from the Indians? The young minister, named Roger Williams, answered all his own questions. No, said Williams, many Puritan practices in Massachusetts Bay were wrong. Williams's ideas were dangerous. They threatened everything that the Puritan leaders were trying to do. The Puritans demanded that Williams stop criticizing the church officials. Williams refused. Puritan leaders tried to place him under arrest. But in the middle of winter 1636, Williams escaped from the colony. With the help of Indians, he started to build a new town southwest of Massachusetts Bay. He called it Providence. His friends from Massachusetts joined him there. This was the beginning of a new colony, Rhode Island. Here, anyone could attend any church at all. Williams promised that his government would not interfere with religion. In Rhode Island, people could go to church or not, as they wished. The Pilgrims at Plymouth and the Puritans at Massachusetts Bay had found religious freedom for themselves. Now they would give it to nobody else. No Catholics or Jews could worship in Massachusetts. But because of Roger Williams, there was one place in America where everyone could worship freely. Okay, so you're going to answer questions 14, 15, and 16 from this final chunk of the reading. Good luck. I hope the video was helpful, and I will see you next time.